Dear doctors, please remain with the webinar. We will be live in 2 minutes. Doctors, we are going live in 1 minute from now.
Yes.
Sir, please start.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Ajanta Pharma, a warm welcome to all doctors. The world today is going digital, and its effective use can go a long way in building one's brand image in the minds of the patients and the peers. Hence, today's topic, unlocking digital media potential for medical professionals may be of great use. We have global digital experts, Suryasen Kundu, Raghavraja Nair, Glenn D'Souza. They have worked globally with reputed institutions. I invite Suryasen to start and introduce other speakers. You can post your questions on question box, which would be answered at the end of the talk. Now, over to you, Suryasen.
Hello and good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning, and it gives me great pleasure to be here on this platform today. As Mr. Pandey has mentioned, I have a couple of my colleagues on this call as well, and we are looking forward to an engaging session where we sort of give you perspective on how digital has really transformed the communication landscape, and particular to doctors, and what are some of the simple things that you can do in order to create your own digital identity and help communities foster this digital environment for medical professionals. On that note, I'm going to proceed to the first slide. So Raghav, if you can move forward by one slide. I'll allow for a video to play and speak after that. Raghav, if you can go remove the mute button, please.
पैंडेमिक में सबसे जरूरी यही है रिसोर्सेस का वहां इस्तेमाल होना जहां उसकी जरूरत है। हम आपके लिए काम पर रहते हैं, आप हमारे लिए घर पर रहते हैं। मेडिकल स्टाफ, नर्सेस, डॉक्टर्स हमारे लिए बहुत मेहनत कर रहे हैं। थैंक यू डॉक्टर्स।
And I would like to resonate that sentiment as well. Thank you very much, doctors, for being here. And for in these times of crisis, that was a video that was been put together by Google themselves to recognize the efforts that some of you are making to really hold us together, the wider communities at this time and day. Today, we will take you through four specific areas which we have sort of outlined in this seminar. There is the power of digital. So I will take you through the context of how important digital has become in this day and age. And Raghav will sort of help you take you through digital for you, what it actually means, what are some of the platforms that you can look at for being present and where people are looking for answers. And then finally, with online reputation guardrails, just to give you a sense of do's and don'ts on the online platforms, which should help you sort of craft your messages properly on the platforms that you choose to be on. And finally, we'll have room for questions and answer, and we'll be very happy to take any questions that you may have. Raghav, if you can go to the next slide, please. So the two things that I'll be covering are emerging trends, and we'll give you a sense of certain case studies about what's really happening and give you real live examples of the internet where we will see some of these profiles. Next slide, please, Raghav. Right. So as I was mentioning, it's not unknown to anyone that we are in the middle of an unprecedented public health crisis. What we've been observing, of course, and I'm sure this is visible to everyone, communications in the healthcare space is now being taken very seriously. And you have official accounts like MyGov India, Indian Medical Association putting out content in the right spirit of things, informing people of the usage of medicines as well. Because we are also in the midst of an information war where there's a lot of misinformation that is spreading around as well. So platforms are trying to fight that internally as well. But doctors can play a significant role in order to perpetuate the right sort of information that is going on. And the public at large is looking towards doctors to help guide them with the right sort of information. Next slide, please, Raghav. Right. So I'll be showing you a little video out here about how doctors and medical workers are actually becoming content creators globally. I'll let this video play for a minute. Raghav?
Hey guys, this novel coronavirus pandemic has truly affected all of us across the globe. But one of the hardest hit communities has been healthcare frontline workers. This means doctors, nurses, CMAs, respiratory therapists, technicians, custodial staff, and so many more. Today, I'd like to take a focus and celebrate doctors in memory of those who've laid down their lives in the battle against COVID-19. I sat down and I interviewed over 100 physicians to get their take, their experiences, and learn their perspectives about the coronavirus. Know that all the revenue generated from this video, AdSense, donations, and even merch sales, linked down below, are all going to the CDC Foundation to help continue this battle against COVID-19. First question I asked these doctors, what do you think is not getting enough attention?
I wish there was more credit and awareness being given to other members of the healthcare teams, aside from just the doctors and the nurses.
Techs, transporters, housekeeping, kitchen staff, valets, operators,
X-ray, laboratory, radiology techs, EMTs, janitorial staff,
Cafeteria workers, the respiratory therapists, the nurses, and everyone else here on the front lines is towards our ability to do our jobs.
the number of doctors and healthcare professionals out there who've gotten seriously ill and even lost their lives fighting this disease.
Some healthcare workers have been disciplined for speaking up about the lack of personal protective equipment.
Testing is an area we need a huge amount of focus on and attention on in the UK.
We need antibody tests. We need to know who has immunity.
In many communities, the small number of cases being reported is simply a reflection of lack of testing. How coronavirus is and will affect certain communities. Our homeless community, our community of people with special needs, the domestic abuse and domestic violence that is happening during a pandemic, with victims being in the same home as perpetrators for longer periods of time in this quarantine.
We've limited and cut the number of visits a woman can have before she delivers.
Visitors, family, really no one is allowed to be at the bedside when you're infected with COVID.
If you look closely, you will see that there are young people who are otherwise well who can get seriously ill.
We can't really see the emotional.
Raghav, I think we can pause here. So I just wanted to give you a sense of a couple of things from the last video. As you have seen, the video was actually put together by a very famous personality. He's one of the most popular doctors on YouTube, and he has several million followers subscribed to him on YouTube because of the sort of content that he makes. The second thing I wanted to highlight, and we'll be happy to share links to the videos as well, is how for every doctor that he was referring to, you may have noticed that the name or the internet ID or the handle of the doctor, either on Twitter or on TikTok, was actually shared in the video itself. So it's actually a great way of having this independent identifiers if you have social media properties. If you're going to be speaking on public platforms, it's quite often the practice of content creators to leave links to the said personalities as well. So it gives you perspective about how this is going. The other thing you may have noticed is that doctors from all specializations were talking about coronavirus and some of the novel challenges that they are noticing out there. I also wanted to take up the opportunity to show you another video about how doctors are actually providing, useful public service and counsel around some simple everyday issues, which are the public at large are not clear about. So some of the first few questions when the coronavirus actually broke out from people were, how do I actually sanitize my groceries well? And this doctor actually put together a video which went viral within the first few days of the corona being identified, because of his very simple and clean instructions on how to manage sanitization at home. So Raghav, if you can just play this for a bit.
We have a dilemma in society that we need to eat to live,
but we also need to get that food. And that getting of food is now risky. And I'm going to help you reduce your risk as you go out into the marketplace. When you go out to get your groceries and you bring them home, try not to bring them into your house unless you absolutely need them. Now, if we're going to go with the logic of the National Institute of Health, we could leave those groceries in our garage or on our porch for 3 days. And if you use a shopping service, please don't have them come into your house. Have them dump them outside so that you can bring them in when you need them. And if you must bring them in, we're going to go through some tips using these modified sterile techniques to remove possible coronavirus from the groceries containers and the groceries themselves. Imagine that the groceries that you have are covered with some glitter. And your goal at the end of this is to not have any glitter in your house, on your hands, or especially on your face. And imagine that disinfectants and soap, they have the power to dissolve that glitter. So when you're out in the store, it's not just about wiping down the shopping cart handle with an antiseptic wipe. We need to do more than that. We need to be better than that when we go into the supermarket. Here's some tips. Wipe down your cart. When you look at items and you're considering buying, commit to buy those items before you pick them up. You don't know if there's coronavirus on those and you don't want to be putting coronavirus on those. Plan before you go to the supermarket. Minimize your time in the supermarket. And I recommend that you get 2 weeks worth of groceries when you go. Now, before I go outdoors and get my groceries to bring them inside, I'm going to sanitize my table. The Center for Disease Control says that we can use any standard disinfectant to rid our surfaces of coronavirus. Now this side of the table is going to be my clean side. And we're going to consider the other side of the table as a dirty side where we're going to put our groceries from outside the house. So remember, everything that goes to this side of the table is going to be considered clean and sanitized. Now I have a bag with some medicine in it. Open that bag. But because I know that human hands have touched this medication bottle,
so Raghav, I think we can move on from the video. I think I just wanted to give you a sense of how popular this video has become. So if you may have seen some of the stats, you must have seen how the video actually went viral. What we've also noticed with in the recent times, because we've been doing a lot of research on our own onus and for a lot of our clients about some of the trends that are taken on from coronavirus, because it's a one-off event which has potentially the ability to change the future course of business, communications, economy, and even social structures. Some of the things that we've definitely noticed, and healthcare obviously being at the forefront of this transformation, we've seen the boom in telemedicine happening over the last couple of months in definitive terms. We have increasingly seen patients who are embracing online consultations on a variety of issues, mental health being just one of them, but even any other specific conditions regarding health, telemedicine seems to be here to stay. The graph that you can see on your right is from Google search trends, and you can see how there's been almost 60% increase in search volume regarding telemedicine in the last couple of months. And this is India-specific data itself. So we think it'll be part of the new normal. People will plan their experiences. The patient journeys are going to look very different from the point of initiation as well. And it's important at that point of time that the right counsel and your presence is available in digital platforms from the point of consideration itself. Next slide, please, Raghav. To give you a sense of how many people are actually online in India, this is what Connected India actually looks like as of January 2020. There's 1.06 billion phone connections. There's 687 million internet users, and we are second only to China and ahead of the United States. And of course, in terms of the social media users, there's 400 million users on various social platforms in India as well. The other interesting thing which we would recommend for healthcare professionals is to really consider the vernacular opportunity that's out there as far as the internet. So from 2015 to 2018, of the almost 40 million internet users who came into India to start using the internet, 9 out of 10 people were looking at Indian languages, and that's been the first point of contact with the internet for these people. So from a content production perspective, whether you choose to be on Twitter, whether you choose to do a video, do remember that the availability of content in regional languages is still in very short supply. So any sort of instructional videos, any recommendation, any advice, conversations in vernacular are a huge untapped opportunity when it comes to India in particular. Next slide, please, Raghav. So broadly, what we would like to leave you with as part of this section and thoughts that we will carry forward into the next sections as well is that healthcare technology has always been changing, but it is moving at an accelerated space. There are better and more treatment options accessible. You can get opinions, appointments, video consultations, doctors on demand, health records, all from the comfort of your own home. And this technology is changing not just for prospective patients, but even at the doctor's end with the variety of startups who are trying to solve problems in multiple avenues. There's improved care and efficiency. So patient care has improved drastically with technology interventions like this. And there have been studies to actually prove that there are long-running effects of people actually using some of these solutions to find solace, to find advice. It's also more inclusive. So I think people are also providing how to provide care at home, rehabilitation. These are also becoming very interesting topics around which content is being created. And there is, of course, expertise at scale. So global networks of experts are actually coming together. And we would like for you to be part of those discussions. Today, what we leave you with is just a thread of how you can form some of those connections and communications with your peers at the international level through the various social media platforms that we're looking at. Next slide, please, Raghav. So I'll hand it over to Raghav, one of my colleagues out here. He's been working on multiple mandates. He's worked with the Mayo Clinic as well. He's been on a few mandates. He's worked with me on some things that we've done for other companies as well. Raghav, will you please go ahead?
Thank you, Surya. Hi, everyone. I'm Raghav. So the section I'm going to talk about to you today is digital for you. So what does it mean for you as a medical professional? What are the key core benefits of using this platform? And how do we leverage those? So how do we get discovered and how do we really use social media for your advantage? So the first thing we want to touch upon is the two core benefits. So the first is discoverability. This gives you a way to be accessible across the globe, whether it's patients, whether it's peers, etc. The second is being able to stand out. So if you consider the internet as an ocean, while there is a way to rise above the tide, what is it that truly sets you apart from everybody else? So these are the two core principles that we'll see how you can craft as we go forward. So in the online space, the most important element is discovery. So what do people do to find information or individuals or a doctor? Search is known to be the most popular format in the online space. So we've seen amazing numbers of 2.5 trillion searches that happen in any given point of time in a year. So how do we really leverage this and how do we make search work for us? So just to give you a sense of what's happening given Corona and the COVID-19 scenario in the recent past, in India, in the first quarter itself, there has been a 60% increase in people searching for consult doctor online. Globally, about 50% of all searches are about locally relevant information. So for example, if I'm in Bombay or from Delhi or I'm in Bangalore, I'm trying to find a grocery store, a doctor, an expert, or anything, any service that I need near me. So what we're going to do now is to give you a live preview of how it really works. So all I want all of you to do is quickly open on your browser and do a simple Google search for a keyword like best cardiologist in India. So what I'm going to do quickly is also do the same on my browser so you can look at what it really shows up. So here we can see that a typical search. So while there will be, I'm sure a lot of you are looking at this in your browser, there will be slight differences depending on what location you're in, etc. But there are common elements, and those are the elements I want to call out. So first, of course, there will be an ad that you can see. Beyond that, you'll see a map and a listing of potential cardiologists near me. So again, this information that Google's throwing up is tailored to you and is tied into the location you are in. So location specific data and location specific listings are very important to getting discovered through search. Now, the second aspect that we want to look at is what are the other listings that show up. So there is either hospital listings or there are appointment platforms that show up on when you do this search. Again, there are also a few third-party websites that are publishing lists of who the top doctors are across the country. Now, if I had to segregate them and break this down into the three key segments that you will find consistently across wherever you are searching, across all the doctors that have joined us today. The first, of course, to reiterate, would be the location-specific searches. The second would be the layer that talks about hospitals, your clinics, your appointment booking platforms, and third-party websites. And the fourth will be social media. Now, I'm sure you're all wondering why we're talking about these four parameters. So if you look at the first three parameters that we have, the first two, the location as well as hospitals, clinics, etc., aren't something that you can directly control. So that leaves us with social media. So social media in general allows you to own and create accounts that will then help drive discovery directly. So what can you truly do to stand out, right? So you've seen that there is so much information that shows up. There's so many people competing for that first page on the Google search. So what you can truly do is, one, leverage social media platforms. So we'll look at what platforms and what you can start with as we go forward. The second is looking at peer-to-peer networks, because given the scenario now and your inability to attend physical conferences with peers, etc., using digital and maximizing its potential truly will unlock a brand new world in the peer ecosystem. But the third aspect is about earned platforms, that things that you've already been doing. So your submissions to medical journals, your research papers, your videos that you've published, you've done with third parties, or any news and TV mentions that you already have. So coming to what social media platforms we can speak about today. Also, some of you might already be on some of these platforms. So don't worry, we'll also look at how you can increase your presence there, whether it's the number of people who follow you, whether it's the performance of the content you push. We'll also talk about that. So in terms of how we've structured this, we've taken the first three platforms that you can see, which is QUORA, LinkedIn, and Twitter, because they have a direct impact on how people find you via search. And then, of course, we'll also look at Facebook, a platform that you're all very familiar with. So moving to our first platform, which is QUORA. So what is QUORA? QUORA is a question and answer platform where people share and gain knowledge. So simply put, millions of people post questions and the QUORA community at large will respond with answers based on their domain expertise or knowledge or what they've done on research. So simply put, it's a Q&A platform for the masses. So how does a doctor like you truly leverage this? The first thing you should do is find topics and spaces that are relevant to you. So if you're a cardiologist, an endocrinologist, neuro, or any other specialization that you have, you can easily find these topics and then look at questions and what answers are being given on that. So what does this help with? This helps you understand the most commonly asked questions and the mindset of customers, not only in India, but across the globe. The third aspect is showing your expertise and proving your thought leadership in this space by answering relevant questions with answers wherever possible. So you could easily look at various questions that are particular to your specialization, that are particular to doctors in general, or could be a patient related question that you find. So for those of you who haven't used QUORA in the past, it's a simple two-step process where you just sign up and you have the ability to create an account. Now, what does it look like? I'm quickly going to show you a sample account so that you can see a live account of what a QUORA profile will really look like. So you could easily set up your profile. You could set up your specialization. There is a feature to write a short write-up about yourself. And there are, of course, your credentials. So your specialization, the hospital or the clinic you're associated with, etc. Now, how do I use it as a doctor? So to give you an example here, we've seen this particular doctor has answered a few questions across the board. Now, when it comes to QUORA, what is good and how do you judge whether something's really liked and shared? So similar to Facebook, QUORA has a mechanism called upward. So you see this upward pointing arrow. So this is an equivalent of a like in Facebook. So every time somebody endorses the opinion or the answer that's shared by this doctor, they will they will click on this button, show that they approve of this answer and they endorse it. Similarly, there is an option to share, which works similar to all other social media platforms. And of course, there is also an option to further have a conversation on that answer. So when it comes to the metrics for success, what you're looking at is the number of upvotes you get. So for example, this particular answer that he has shared has a significant number of upvotes. Now, for those of you thinking that, okay, I made a platform and I've answered a few questions, but how do I really build a loyal audience and reach a wide audience? So if you see this number here, he has around 36,000 followers who follow his responses. So how did he get there? So on QUORA, the first step to do is, once you've identified a specific niche that you want to be seen as a domain expert in, you can start answering multiple questions under that domain. So the strategy needs to be answer as many questions as you can initially, and then take a deep dive into responding with second responses and third responses in each of those questions. Over time, you will see that because of the number of different people as a part of those questions, you will eventually build a loyal following over time. So going back to QUORA and summarizing what we just saw, the first step, of course, is mentioning relevant information in your profile with your specialty and your hospital or clinic. The second is finding relevant spaces or topics. And the third is, of course, finding relevant peers or individuals on the platform who you can then interact with. So in terms of guidelines, what QUORA truly allows you to do is evolve with payers and patients in mind. So given a sense of what conversations and what questions they are asking, you will be able to truly map what the needs and the gaps are. Similarly, the advice we have for you is, in case you disagree to something that's posted on QUORA that falls under your professional domain, please don't discredit or insult others, but there is an option to report inaccurate information on it. So which is what you should use. Similarly, two pieces of advice that you'll see feature consistently everywhere that we are sharing with you is, please disclose your affiliation. So if it's a hospital you're affiliated with or a clinic, etc., please make sure you disclose that, and also support your opinions with relevant medical journal sources, research papers, wherever possible. So that was QUORA. So now coming to LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is a platform that a lot of you have heard of, the Professionals' Delight, the most popular platform for professional development across the globe. But as a doctor, what do I do with it? And how do I truly leverage it to its true potential? Because LinkedIn is one of the few platforms that truly allows you to showcase key professional achievements and medical journals, etc., unlike any other. So what can you do? So for those who are new to this platform, the first, of course, is the ability to build a comprehensive profile that lists not only information about what you've done, the hospitals you've worked in, your specialization, but also a bunch of other relevant information that I'll show you in the example as we move forward. The second aspect is joining relevant discussions and groups of other peers or other communities on LinkedIn. And the third aspect, of course, is publishing content. Again, LinkedIn is very unique in this matter because it allows you to publish content which is more thought leadership driven and in formats that are typically not allowed elsewhere. So a simple two-step process to sign up is, once you've made up an account, all you need to do is ensure a fully filled profile and publish timely information which is relevant to your peers and potential patients. So what we're going to do now is again look at a good example of what a LinkedIn profile could be that you could truly leverage. So here's another example that we have from Jock Podonu. He is again someone who's at Harvard Medical School and a cardiovascular surgeon himself. So if you look at quickly what his profile calls out, of course, besides the fact that where he's employed, it's that also has a short bio that talks about what he's done and his achievements over time. Now, this is a particular section that I want to draw your attention to. These are features that are unique only to LinkedIn. So here you can see a video that he has published in partnership with a news publication. There's an article that he's published. Again, there are books that he has published, etc. Now, these information or these features don't exist anywhere else. So for you as a doctor, it's very important to be able to share links to papers that have been published in medical journals, links to videos that you've shared, links to even articles or books or any online assets that you've helped create. Now, what does he do and how do we make sure that we build this audience? So to give you a reference of the numbers that he has over here, you can see 172,000 followers. So how did he get there and what does he publish? So we're just going to quickly look at what these articles are that he's talking about. So in general, what you'll see is there are certain categories of information that doctors publish. One, they talk about their domain, right? And they share their personal opinions on it. Second, they will share third-party information, whether it's a medical journal, whether it's an online news publication, etc. And the third is about their engagement. So if it's a session that you're doing where you're doing a seminar or you're doing a live session with someone or you're doing a certain podcast, this is a great platform to let your peers and potential patients know. So this, for example, the first post that we see is about a live session that he's doing. The second is about a news story that is relevant to the COVID-19 crisis. So the other aspect that you've seen consistent from all of this content that I can show you on screen now is about relevance. Again, while he's a cardiovascular surgeon, he's also trying to craft his messages to what's relevant now. So a lot of this content does revolve around COVID-19, but topicality and tying in heart-related information, for example, would be the best way to go when it comes to LinkedIn. So coming back to what we've seen, of course, when it comes to your profile, making sure an exhaustive profile that features all your key achievements are included. The second aspect is being consistent. You've seen with Jack's profile how he's continued to publish content in multiple formats, etc. Now, like I was saying in the past, LinkedIn allows you to publish specific content, whether it's reports, etc., in PDFs, Words, Word documents, etc., which others don't. So please feel free to share such important information with all of your followers over time. Now, what you'll see is that while you started out on LinkedIn, and some of you might ask me, how do I build 100,000 followers? What's key on LinkedIn is being able to be consistent with your content. And the second is trying to find relevance and include other partners or other peers or other potential patients in the conversation. So what are the guidelines for LinkedIn? So how do you build your professional reputation? So the first is, of course, write articles as often as possible, include videos, images, any visual references that you can with those articles. You can use the variety of formats that LinkedIn allows. And as always, please disclose all affiliations and support opinions with sources wherever possible. Now coming to Twitter. Now, Twitter is something that we've seen everybody from the Prime Minister to relevant doctors across the globe use successfully to start movements, to speak about to start patient awareness initiatives, to talk about disease-specific areas, etc. So how do you leverage Twitter is the question that you have. So the first thing that you have to do is Twitter is a vast space in which multiple conversations exist. But what's at the heart of Twitter is speaking about what's relevant now. So Twitter is all about the latest things that are happening. So it could be the news, it could be an announcement. It's about what's happening around me in this moment. So for you as a doctor, it could often be confusing to decide what is it that you should speak about. Now, to do that, I'll show you a simple online tool that allows you to find relevant conversations that are in the healthcare space. Now, that's something that you should use as a starting point to drive conversations, to start publishing content, etc. Again, for those of you who've not used Twitter and you're going to set it up for the first time, there's a simple setup process where once you sign up, you can find relevant peers or individuals that you want to follow, and you could publish content from time to time. Now, again, coming to our live preview for Twitter, again, I'm going to take you back to a live profile of a doctor. So again, this example that we have is a cardiologist, but this is just to give you a sense of what content you could publish if you have a specific specialization. The same applies to every other specialization out there. Here's just an example. So the first post that you're seeing here on screen is about a webinar that's relevant, right? Now, this is, of course, targeted at his peers. The second you're saying is, of course, third-party content, which is about an opinion somebody else has and a link to a relevant post. The third is a post from the BMJ journal, a journal I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of. Now, this talks about heart and in the intersection of COVID-19 and cardiovascular disease. Now, this is exactly the kind of content that you should create to be able to drive engagement and build followers, because given the context of COVID and COVID being the new reality for all of us, how do you really marry these two and educate your audiences, whether it's potential patients, whether it's peers, etc., with relevant content is going to be key. Again, you've seen a bunch of thought leadership related content about cardio webinars, and also content that's targeted to potential patients, etc., which is again backed with data and backed with third-party content that adds credibility to what he has to say. So on Twitter, the first step is, of course, the bio. The second is finding relevant hashtags. And the third is fellow peers, journals, and news. So now we're going to look at the online tool I spoke about. It's called the Healthcare Hashtag Project. It's a simple online portal where all you have to do is log into that portal and then look at relevant conversations, irrespective of what specialty or what disease, what conference, etc. you want to go after. So here you can see a list of various hashtags that can be used across Twitter. For those of you who are new to Twitter, some of you might be asking, what is a hashtag? So simply put, a hashtag is a connector of conversations. So on Twitter, if you happen to click on many of these hashtags, you will open up a stream of conversations that are related to that topic. So for those of you who've not used Twitter in the past, hashtags allow you to quickly access information that's not only relevant, but in the space that you want to go after. So that's an easy way to cut through the clutter of Twitter when it comes to creating content.
I'd like to just leave a note out there as Raghav is going through this. One of the things that we've noticed and when we've worked with medical professionals in the past is a lot of them are hesitant about creating their own content. So when you look through hashtags and if you find content that really resonates with you, or if it's something that you feel a lot of people should know about, you can simply retweet that content and get started. So it's a useful way to sort of engage on the platform itself, get started easy. Obviously, eventually the idea will be to focus on your opinions, and eventually also the idea is to create a following of users who will be tuned into your brand to get your insights going forward. So I just wanted to leave that note that, the simplest way to engage out there is to find content that really resonates with you and retweet that content so people have an understanding of what really interests you. Yes, Raghav.
Thank you, Surya. So what guidelines do we follow? Now, Twitter is a platform where we have to be conscious of the content we create, because when you publish something on Twitter, it's available for the world to see. Now, this is some of the aspects of Twitter that's unique to it. So what we recommend is that at any given point of time, take a good step back to be conscious of the content that you create on Twitter. The second aspect, of course, Twitter as a platform is meant for short content and not long, verbose content, unlike maybe a LinkedIn that we've seen in the past. Twitter definitely requires shorter content because there is a limitation on what you can write. Similarly, when it comes to trending topics or recent events, Twitter is the de facto platform for the first set of conversations on anything that's recent. So you can easily have the first mover advantage by speaking about trending topics or recent events on a platform like Twitter. And as always, please disclose affiliations and support your opinions with sources. We've seen examples in the past where that helps not only credibility, but also drives the engagement, whether it's with patients or whether it's with peers. Now coming to a platform that I'm sure a lot of you are already on, have used a lot. I don't know if from a professional capacity, but definitely from a personal capacity, I'm sure a lot of you have already used it. Now, I'm sure some of you might be asking that why are we talking about a platform that we know right at the very end? So if you look at the core principles of discovery and why we want to use the online medium, discovery plays a very, very important role. Now, when it comes to search, Facebook has a very minute role to play when it comes to organic discovery. So if you have a presence on Quora, LinkedIn, and Twitter, they are much more likelier to show up on search as opposed to Facebook. Now, having said that, the first defining principle on Facebook is please create a Facebook page. So that's a professional page that's separate from your personal account. So setting up a Facebook page for yourself or your hospital or clinic is going to be key to be able to communicate to a wide audience and allow you to separate your personal and your professional. Now, the second aspect is, of course, publishing content regularly, because publishing content for your potential patients, for peers, etc., is going to be critical to ensuring success in the long run. And the third lesser known element is going to be the fact that Facebook over the years rather, has now evolved to a platform which restricts the content that you publish and its visibility to a fraction of your audience. So what I'm going to do quickly to give you a sense of this is show you a live profile. So let's look at this doctor and his profile, for example. So while you can see that he has 1,630 people that follow him, you'll see when it comes to the content itself, there are only 40 people who like this content. So now it's not that his content isn't great, but Facebook as a platform ensures only roughly about 2 or 3% of your audience will organically see anything that you publish. So to circumvent this, Facebook has now started asking people to pay for a higher reach, and that's in a way like promoting a post. So this particular post, for example, as opposed to reaching 40 people, can reach 1,000 more people if you're willing to spend some monies on this. So that's the reason why Facebook hasn't been our first recommendation starting today. So, but just when it comes to content, etc., again, a good example of what's happening in the space and what you'll see consistently when it comes to content is relevance. So while he's published content that wishes potential patients about a festive day, he's also going to talk about how heart patients fasting in Ramadan and the tips that they need to adhere to. So if you look at what he's trying to do here, is he's trying to find ways to create an opportunity to marry his professional opinion with something that's topical so that it multiplies the relevance that it has for his potential patients. Again, when it comes to Corona and his heart, here's a post about a session that he's doing live with news publications in India about Corona and heart disease. Here's another post that talks about COVID-19 and special precautions needed for heart patients during this time. So over time, while a lot of these are specialization specific, you can find ways to marry your specialization and marry your niche to what's relevant, what's happening around you. So potential patients are much more likelier to be able to appreciate this. So as you can see here, this post has around 40 shares, which is very good. So on Facebook, to summarize, 3 key elements: please create a Facebook page that separates your professional life and your personal life. The second is to publish often, publish relevant information in multiple formats, whether it's images, videos, etc. And the third aspect is, of course, wherever possible, you should be able to boost your reach. That's how you can increase the number of people who follow you and the number of people who consume your content over time. So Facebook is your patient connect. So the guidelines, some of which we've seen earlier, is about keeping your patient's interest at heart when you're publishing content. There, Facebook also offers the ability to go live. So that's very similar to what we're doing now. You could go live and have a real conversation in real time, look at questions and answers with your potential patients. And as always, please disclose all your affiliations and support opinions with sources wherever possible. So we've now covered 4 platforms across the digital world, platforms that some of you have started with, some of you will start with. But what's key to take away across all of these platforms is that one question. Say I'm on Facebook, say I'm on QUORA, I'm on LinkedIn, etc. How do I drive my visibility? So some examples that we've seen, like in the video when we started, was about doctors mentioning their Twitter handles, etc. So simple things like mentioning your social media handles on whether it's a prescription cover, whether it's a business card, etc. Those are key to driving visibility in existing stationery, right? Also, every time you have a mention on a hospital website, on a clinic, or whether you're collaborating with someone, every time your name is mentioned and your designation is mentioned, also make sure you include at least one, if not all, social media handles to significantly amplify your social media presence and gain followers quickly. Now, here's a few other platforms. While social media platforms are something that we've looked at, here are 3 other options that we want to place in front of you that will truly allow you to expand your reach online. So the first, of course, is doctor communities. So some of you might have seen doctor platforms like DocPlexes, Curify, Sermo, etc., which allow only doctors to be admitted as part of this community. Now, not only does that allow you to tap into a wider network, it also allows you to speak to people who have the same specialization as you and maybe different locations all across the country and even the world. Now that, and of course, simple features like discussing live case studies, etc., are inherent to these platforms, and the learning and education potential is significant. Now, the second aspect is appointment platforms. Now, I'm sure you've heard of a Practo or 1MG, PharmEasy, and a lot of others are now trying to be a facilitator between a patient and a doctor. Now, while some of you might have had hesitations in the past to have a presence on these platforms, our recommendation is to have a presence, is to be able to be in control. Now, rather than not having a presence and letting the platform itself publish information about you, which may or may not be 100% accurate and may or may not be to the way you prefer it, it's better to be on these platforms to be able to control exactly what people see online. Now, the third aspect, coming from an insight that we've seen when Surya spoke about vernacular, is about how voice and video are key to driving significant consumption today. So everybody today, as opposed to reading a 1,000-word article, would rather see a 1-minute video. So what we are seeing is that not only is making a video good enough, but doing it in vernacular languages or doing it in a language that you know your prospective patients appreciate will significantly drive your visibility and your reach. So it could be a simple video you make and share with your potential patients and your community on WhatsApp. It could be something you do on YouTube. It could be something you do on Facebook. or LinkedIn or Twitter. So the platform isn't really what's important, but creating content that's relevant to your patient and in the language that's relevant to them is key. So now that we've seen all the social media platforms and we've seen what we can do and how to succeed on social media platforms and what are the steps it takes, we're going to talk about general reputation guardrails. So what are the do's and don'ts, and what are the simple tips that apply for everything you do in the digital space? And then we go on to talk about your first step. So let's look at the do's and don'ts. Now, simply put, the do's calls out the necessity to take ownership of your reputation. When I say take ownership of your reputation, it means that having an online presence, like I mentioned before, allows you to control the narrative, control the story, craft your own way, craft your own positioning. The second is, of course, encourage potential patients, the relevant, your communities, etc., to share feedback and engage with authentic sources of your online presence on social media sites. And the third is always create content with the audience in mind. So when I say this, what I mean is if I'm creating content for patients, always keep in mind what their mindset is, what their most commonly asked questions are, and then try and create content that fills that gap. Similarly, when it comes to peers, what do you think are the most commonly thought questions within the peer community? So can you create content that helps address some of that? That's what your strategy should be. So often we've seen that while doctors have created profile, in the long run, they're always trying to ask us about, so what do I publish now? So I did something that I thought, and I've done it for like 6 months, but now I can't think of what else to do. So as a doctor, you already have amazing access to not only patients and your community, but also ideas. I'll tell you how. So as a doctor, you see with the increasing number of patient visits, you understand trends and patterns. Similarly, when it comes to conversations you do with your peers, you're also absorbing trends and patterns and making certain opinions of it, right? So what you do at any given point of time is use those to get inspired and create content with that. Now, when it comes to don'ts, of course, patient privacy is number one. So while we've said 3 common points, patient privacy rules when it comes to social media, please do not publish any information in any way that allows anybody to identify a patient, whether it's visual imagery, whether it's data information, age, demographic, could be any information that could help directly identify a patient. Please steer clear of that. And the second aspect is find a way to clearly separate your personal and your professional presence in the online space. Now, talking about personal branding. So these are simple 5 tips that apply to everything you do in the online space. So the first talks about create a niche for yourself. Now, like I said, if the internet were an ocean and you had a way to rise above the tide, what is it that sets you apart from everybody else? Now, that's a question only you can answer. So you need to find a niche, a space, or a topic that you think you will own going forward. Use that as your guiding principle to create content in the future. The second is, now that you've created this theme or topic that you know that you're going to own, then be consistent with it and be authentic to what this has to offer. The third is, of course, when it comes to the social digital world, a lot of you are already always up to date with news and what's happening in this space. But being up to date allows you to gives you that opportunity to have that conversation or share your opinion on social media. So that's something you should definitely do. I know a lot of you are definitely up to date with exactly what's happening, reading all the latest journals or latest papers that are released, but using that information and creating powerful, compelling content is going to be key to your success. Now, the fourth aspect is about citing references so that people realize that whatever you say comes from a position of thought leadership and domain expertise, unlike anybody else. So being able to use links to maybe the medical journal research paper or to reports that help support all of the opinions you make are a great way to drive not only followers, but also engagement with the content you create. Now, the fifth aspect, some of which we've already mentioned in the past, is understanding your audience and creating for them. In the whole digital ecosystem, you will find over time what you create as content is going to define your success, right? So, but what are the guiding principles and how do I remain consistent? So I might have enough content for a month or two, but what do I do going forward? So at always, whenever you think you're stuck about what content should I create, always go back to asking yourself, what does my patient care about, or what does my peer care about, and how can I address some of that? So these two questions will help you guide your content in the future. So now we've seen everything that we can do with social media. We've seen these reputation guardrails, etc. Now, for those of you who haven't really done much of this in the past, and for those of you who have done parts of it in the past, the next question is that, okay, now I've seen all of this information. I've seen what those profiles look like, but how do I really get to it? So in this, it's a simple 3-step process. While we want to say that this is an ongoing journey because digital communications is here to stay, and how you go about using it and leveraging it has to evolve over time. So while we are giving you a framework, this applies forever in your journey on social and digital spaces. So the first step is to do an audit. So what I'd recommend a lot of you should do is do a simple Google search with your name, right? And look at all the information that shows up. So there will be information that you're familiar with. There'll be new information. There will be websites that talk about you that you didn't know. That should be the first easy step for you to do. Once you've done that, from content that you've seen in the beginning about search and what sections you typically see, you should then identify, okay, what are the hospitals, etc., or the clinics, etc., that have mentioned me? What are the third-party websites that have mentioned me? And then you should also check, if you don't have a social media presence, or if you do, what social media platforms are showing up when you do a search for your name. Now, doing this allows you or gives you a status quo of where you are now and gives you a good benchmark to evaluate once you started your journey on digital. The second aspect is creating your social media profiles. We've seen examples of 4 profiles, 4 social media handles in the past. Some of you might be on a few of them. Please go ahead and create social media accounts on the others that you're not a part of yet. And the third part is about, of course, participating. Be active on social media, publish content, speak to others, share relevant content of others. These 3 principles will make sure over time, not only do you gain followers and reach a wider audience, but you'll also be recognized as an expert by a wider set of audience. Now, some of you might ask, some doctors have had success, but is there anybody who's really had significant success when it comes to social media? So I have 2 examples on the screen here today. So here, new and old isn't reflection of their age. It's a reflection of a new entrant in this space, a doctor who's recently, in the recent past, started using social media, and someone who's been an marquee pioneer when it comes to doctors using social media. So when I say that, I'm going to start with Kevin MD. He's been in this ecosystem and been a doctor who's active on social media for over 7-8 years now. He's one of the pioneering leaders who talks about how doctors can truly use social media and amplify and utilize it to its best potential. Now, the reason why I have a new entrant here is to give you a sense of the potential this platform has. So Dr. Mikhail Wachowski, he has on one platform like Instagram, 3.6 million followers. So at any given point of time, he has the ability to reach a wider audience than newspaper circulation in this country. So 3.6 million people in one platform is good enough to run in a small country in itself, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if you look at the significant potential it has to reach a mass audience, then the examples that Dr. Mikhail Wachowski are truly leading the cause. Similarly, when it comes to consistency and finding out how doctors can truly leverage this platform, stay consistent, and over the years be able to maintain this, then Kevin MD is a great example. You can follow him across Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. So these are a few examples of social media stars in the doctor community. Now coming to the end of our module here, there's a fun video we want you to see about how doctors are not only driving thought leadership, but also bringing a smile to faces across the world.
Do you have Instagram? No. Snapchat? Still no. Then what do you have? A life?
Right foot, 2 steps. Foot, 2 steps. To the left.
Basically, I'm saying either way we about to slide. Hey, can't let this one slide.
Now walk it by yourself. Now walk it by yourself.
On the side of my waist, she giving on my peso.
I thought you could never get loose. I thought you could never get loose. I thought you could never get loose. Get loose, get loose. I thought you could never get loose. I thought you could never get loose. What? I thought you could never get loose. Get loose, get loose, get loose.
So that's all we have. I'm going to.
So thank you all for being here. And we've got a few questions coming in. I think Glenn will be helping us sort of go through the questions, and we'll be happy to address some of the questions that have come in through the course of this.
Thank you. I think really interesting questions that have come up based on what Raghav and Surya have presented. I think the first one that is interesting, but Raghav did go through this entire thing was, is handles or platforms like Twitter and LinkedIn helpful for all therapy area doctors? Is it only meant for cardiologists? I know Raghav did use that as an example throughout, but is it helpful for any and every doctor from any specialty? Raghav?
Yes, of course. So while with examples like I showed for the healthcare hashtag project, you'll see that platforms or diseases, right, are agnostic of the platform itself. So you'll find every disease, every specialization, doctors from every specialization on the platform, and your ability to be the first mover in this space is truly what will set you apart. So while some of you might think in the digital space, unlike any other traditional model, first movers have significant advantage because over time, their credibility, their presence, and the content that they have been able to create will be driving not only others, but anybody new will first come on to you because you are one of the early movers in this space.
The next one is a very common question that we get a lot and from every professional. And we've heard this again and again, and this is for Surya. There's a lot of fake news, there's a lot of misinformation in the social web today. Especially on healthcare, how is it that we tackle those information? Because a lot of patients do question us or question doctors on this kind of information.
So that's a very relevant question, particularly at this time. I think what we're seeing from a lot of innovations in the digital space is the ability to match the information that's going out publicly against, particular to coronavirus, it's being checked against WHO records through an artificial intelligence engine to sort out what is the right information and what isn't. On your part, the least that you could do if you have a profile on a platform, and if you're a doctor, is the first and most important step that you can take is to report that particular piece of comment or that particular piece of information to the platform. A Facebook, a LinkedIn, a Twitter usually gives you the opportunity to do that. They have a little button, if you notice somewhere, which can flag a particular piece of information, and you can report it as incorrect. And if enough people do that for a particular piece of information, it will eventually be taken down. That's how the system works.
Okay, the next one has basically 3 parts. It's and this is for Raghav. We've spoken about a lot of platforms, all right, today, and I think what everyone's curious to know is that time is limited with doctors, and with so many interesting platforms around, how is it important to be on all? That's one. Secondly, which is the most important one? And the third, if I publish information on one of the platform, how can I spread it across all the other platforms that I'm on?
Sure. So the first question on what is the best platform to have? So there are two ways we can look at this. One is given that we're in India and the sheer number and size of uh, people online will help us pick the right platform. So like that, given if I were to keep aside Facebook because of the restrictions we spoke about, then I'd say LinkedIn definitely is, because it has about 45 million users in India, right? While Facebook, like we've spoken earlier, has significantly larger images or numbers, there are a lot of restrictions on that platform itself. So LinkedIn, from a peer perspective, also from a patient education perspective, gives you a lot of features that no other platform has. So LinkedIn definitely should be something that you consider, because that's also something that will show up in search. Once you create a credible platform, you'll see that whatever your name is, you Google that and you'll see over time, once you build content and publish it, that starts appearing on search as well.
And how do you push the same content across platforms?
So it's so there are online tools to that. You could easily just schedule a content post and it automatically get published across platforms. So there are tools to do it. So while the platform itself doesn't have those features, if you simply Google on online tools that help you share across platforms, you'll definitely find a lot of them.
So one of them that I can speak about that we've used in the past is it's something called IFTTT. So the way to remember it, if this, then that is what the platform stands for. The key idea is that you can set up triggers. So if you have something that has to go out as an email and a WhatsApp message, you can schedule some of those actions. So based on some specific triggers, you can get the platforms to interact with each other and send it out. Honestly speaking, it's been simplified a lot more over the last 3 or 4 years. This is a tool that's been in play for almost 5 or 6 years. A little bit of tampering around should get you familiar with the platform. Besides that, some of the tools that from a publishing perspective that Raghav spoke about, you can certainly schedule your content to go out on particular days at particular times if you are preparing your content accordingly. Tools like Hootsuite and many other platforms are there which can be used in order to schedule content going out on multiple platforms.
And the last part of that question was, LinkedIn was always known for jobs, because that's a question that's coming a lot on today. So how is it important to build one's knowledge level or reputation online?
Oh yes, you'll see some doctors have done an amazing job at it. LinkedIn has over time evolved from a place where people just went for jobs and a place where people are showcasing domain expertise by not just making a simple post or two, but creating long form content on a regular basis, creating videos, uploading links to podcasts. Again, podcast is a new format which is voice only, that is easy to capture and upload for across all platforms. Now people are increasingly using this platform to truly show and position themselves as an expert within the niche that they are in.
So also let me present the information the other way around. Imagine you're on Facebook. There is no way that I can reach out to all doctors on Facebook, and there's no way that I can, sort of send it out to all doctors on Facebook in India or in a particular city, unless you in your profile, which a lot of people won't do, specifically mention that you're a doctor. How it works on LinkedIn is because it's a professional network and there's a lot of weightage to what sort of qualifications you have, what disciplines you belong to. It is possible for a brand, for another person or whomever else to reach out to specific doctors in specific geographies, in specialist practices through a message. So if you wanted to find out that there's someone who wants to get in touch with you, it's more likely to happen on LinkedIn if you have your profile sorted than on Facebook, because in Facebook, it can't be organized in that fashion. That information will not come across to you. The other very simple, for those who are thinking of LinkedIn as a jobs platform only, I would recommend signing up to some of the public health institutions globally and following those pages, because you will see there are live conferences and webinars happening on LinkedIn on this day and age. And it's also a platform that's very popular in India. India is its largest market in numbers of people who have signed on LinkedIn. And we will continue to see that growth also in terms of professional networking capacity going forward. So it's definitely a platform that we recommend. Twitter for real-time engagement is certainly something that we would also recommend in order for visibility. You also saw certain examples of people being very popular on TikTok. The videos that you just saw was of a doctor who's been known as Dr. TikTok because of his lighthearted spirit that he's had working the long hours in hospitals in Boston during the Corona crisis and trying to keep people cheered up. Certainly, I think you'll see the evolution of the platforms. LinkedIn will evolve, is our take on it significantly, and it's a good place to be discovered.
So clearly, LinkedIn has moved on from just being a job site or job seekers platform to an engaging platform and knowledge building platform. The next question, which is pretty serious, is a lot of content that's shared online. There's a lot of fear amongst the audience today on violating of copyrights and similar issues or infringements. How do we circumvent that, Surya?
A lot of the information that has to go out online, especially in a professional capacity, has to do with the right sort of attribution. The one thing that you must remember is, so there was also problems in the creative world and the intellectual property space about using content that's been created by others. But that problem has usually been circumvented on account of the right sort of attribution being given to the original authors of the paper. Of course, when it comes to medical sciences in particular, you will need to seek permissions, ideally. But if it is towards a greater good, I don't think people typically have a problem with it in their own professional capacities. What you want to do as a quick check on whether it's safe to share that platform is get in touch with the author, who is also likely to be on these social media platforms, and ask them for their permission, and then share it with the right sort of attribution, and you should be fine with that. And that's broadly the guideline that we sort of issue to most professionals in the space as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what even Raghav mentioned in all of the platforms is crediting your information with sources. That basically helps us out for any copyright infringement. Another interesting question that came up, and this for Raghav, is can we use or can we post testimonials of our patients?
So this is again a tricky question, I must say, Glenn. So when it comes to patient confidentiality, while there are standard disclaimers, etc., that can get signed, etc., before the patient testimonial is released, I would say the safest way to do it is to have your hospital or your clinic directly publish it with all the due process taken care of from a patient sign off, etc., that's needed. And what you can do is you can reshare that testimonial as opposed to being the one who publishes it first. While of course in a lot of cases that's okay, but as a doctor, my recommendation, my professional recommendation is to have a safeguard. So use the weight of your organization and make sure that they follow due diligence before they publish the testimonial on their platforms, and then go ahead to reshare it on your personal pages or profiles, etc.
Yes. The other important aspect is, and which we didn't touch upon today, was Instagram and also Facebook with respect to lifestyle diseases. So skin is very popular in the Insta and Facebook. Can you just throw some light on what are people doing there differently? There are a lot of lifestyle influencers that talk about skin and also doctors in that space. And why is Instagram and Facebook more popular than that of LinkedIn, especially when it comes to lifestyle?
So the softer lifestyle elements are significantly popular on Instagram and even Facebook for that matter, because those platforms are visual first. So a lot of these lifestyle related diseases, so take derma, for example, right, skin conditions, etc., are very visual inherently as a medium. So what we want to do is be able to create content as relevant. So I've seen a lot of examples of people talking about how they've been given this blessing that they're at home all the time. So they've significantly improved their skincare regimen and been able to improve skincare outcomes in the month and a half that they've been at home, because this is typically that never happens, right? So while even I'm sure you had a lot of patients who we've recommended please stay indoors depending on their condition, etc. But they've always said I'll have to go to office, I'll have to do I have to go out for a certain number of hours, etc. That's significantly become curtailed today. So in the derma space, I think there is massive opportunity to create content and guidelines and give simple tips to people to make the most of this time that they have at home.
Thank you. Also, the important one is Wikipedia. A lot of profiles out there. Does it make sense to invest time in updating your Wikipedia profile for better Google searches?
So the principle on which Wikipedia pages are made is that there is a bunch of moderators that are a part of that community who will create pages based on who they deem as relevant. So for example, it could be a person's name, it could be a word. There's a Wikipedia page for everything, right? So as an individual, it's best to not be directly involved in updating information about yourself, right? Because the group of moderators, etc., that's their job to make sure that there is an unbiased Wikipedia page. Because otherwise, a lot of cases that we've seen is if you start your own Wikipedia page over time, how it works is that once you join the community, you'll have to make a certain number of edits to be given the opportunity to create a page of your own. And then once you do, and it reads like it's purely made for marketing, Wikipedia and the moderators will take it down. So to completely avoid that, the best case is not to be the first to initiate this process and let a completely neutral third-party set of moderators find you and build a page about you. But what you can always do is if you find incorrect information, there are features to report and get that changed.
So Wikipedia is a very dynamic tool from what Raghav's mentioned. If there's information that is incorrect, you can always write to them and provide the right information and facts, and it will be updated immediately. So that is a process that Wikipedia follows, and we've seen that a lot in the past also. Another important thing is on hashtags. You briefly went through the Twitter hashtags. So how important is hashtags, and what kind of hashtags should a doctor be using when it comes to the content? Could you just briefly spend about a minute of time on that, because we have quite a few more questions to answer.
Sure. So one of the two, so hashtags predominantly are the lifeblood of Twitter. So on Twitter, they're very, very important. While they're relevant on Instagram as well, but predominantly Twitter is the lifeblood and the birthplace of the hashtag. Now, when it comes to you and your domain and your specialization, there are specific hashtags that are already popular and are already being used. But if you're new to the platform, you wouldn't know what they are. So for that, we've looked at a tool earlier, which says healthcare hashtag project. So if you quickly Google healthcare hashtag project, you will find a page that allows you to type in the specialization or the disease, etc., that you're interested in looking at, and it'll quickly list the most popularly used hashtags. So please feel free to use that tool to the most for those of you who are unaware of what hashtags to use. For those who still know that, okay, these are the hashtags I know I need to use. What are the numbers that I should use? How many hashtags should I have? Should I have 10? Should I have 20? So on Twitter, for example, a combination of 3 or 4 is the best and is usually seen to give you the best outcomes. It changes depending on platforms, but on Twitter, definitely 3 or 4 is the best you should do.
All right. So hashtags are important to build profile and also connect to other subject specialists who are speaking about the same subject. But also on the same subject as Twitter, I think there's an important question out here is that, can you use your own name? Does it have to be linked to a hospital? How do I build my profile of a Twitter handle? So what's the strategy for that?
Sure. So yes, you can use your own name. That's inherently why we want you to build your profiles, whether it's a LinkedIn profile, a QUORA profile, or a Twitter profile. Please feel free to use your name, mention your designation, specialization. If you're affiliated to a hospital or a clinic, please go ahead and mention that as well. So that's something that you definitely should do. Again, when it comes to creating that handle and managing it, the first step that we've always seen is once you've decided who you're publishing for, whether it's potential patients, whether it's a peer, keep that in mind and then consistently start publishing content over time. That's the best way to build your profile. Using the right hashtags allow you to reach a wider audience than you would typically, because when you start off, you maybe have 0 followers, then you'll ask your friends to follow you on Twitter and you'll have maybe hundreds, right? But initially hashtags will play a very crucial role, and of course the frequency of content. So if you publish more often, the more likelihood of people discovering you, reading your content and following you.
For Surya, there's quite a few questions on, are there people out there who can manage your social handles, or are there any institutes or universities or private firms that actually provide trainings on managing the social media for doctors today?
There are agencies and specializations where people offer to have content planning services for sure. It's part of something that we at MSL also do for leadership positions in various industries, because often what you don't know is what conversations to be part of, who are some of the most important people that you should follow, what are some of the conversations you need to be seen in, how do you interact with your followers, particularly if you have a lot of them. So there are agencies who will do that for you. That said, it's one of the things that we recommend is to have a personality of your own, and particularly if it's a scientific area of interest, you are the subject matter, so you are best positioned to interact with it. That said, there are agencies who will help you get started, make sure you have profiles on the right pages, give you a sort of journey or a blueprint to get a certain number of followers and certain momentum, and thereafter you will be able to sort of transition into running the platforms on your own. For courses perspective, there is actually a multitude of them. If I am to think of one off the top of my head, there's a site called HubSpot, HUBSPOT. HubSpot is a great resource for having very simple one-line, a few page explainers on how to get started on any of these platforms and how to manage your profile. They've been producing content for a very long time on social media platforms, and their effective management and use. Please feel free to check out some of the courses out there, which should get you familiar with any or all of these platforms quite quickly. So you can look that up as well. Yeah.
There's also another one which spoke about, is it required to have a website for a doctor vis-a-vis the social pages or your social handles?
Sure. I wouldn't say it's an absolute necessity. If you've noticed, what's happened over the last few years is all of the platforms are changing from being just conversational platforms to holding multiple types of content. So imagine something like LinkedIn, for instance, versus something like Twitter. So in Twitter, it's just your bio, and it's a very short description of who you are. And usually people may have a link to their professional sort of affiliations and associations in the short bio, but there really isn't much opportunity to sort of showcase your expertise and or your published research and medical journals that you've been part of on that platform. So LinkedIn as an entity allows you to do that. So from an identity management perspective, does having a website actually make a large difference now that multiple types of content are allowed on a platform like LinkedIn? Possibly not, but a website is often, if used smartly, the easiest way to contain or hold multiple pieces of information at the same time, because it is also the most versatile unit. So you could have your Instagram feed coming into the website. You could publish blogs on the website. You could have your own Twitter profile on the website with a feed coming in of the conversations that you're having. That said, managing a website is also a cumbersome process. It is not something that is, there are some easy platforms to get started with, but to make it effective and to give it the sort of SEO impact, which is critically important and can raise your profile and discovery significantly, it is ongoing, constant work. So please do remember that and consider that when thinking about creating a website. It's good if, as long as you can manage to sort of keep up with it and make sure that it's always there. It's a good place to, it still is the most versatile medium because you can control everything that's on it on your own website.
Just to add to what Surya has already said, when it comes to the website, there's one element that's very, very important, which is the domain name. So I would say any of you who haven't yet bought one, which, so when I say domain name, I mean the website URL that you see, so www.raghavnair.com. So please make sure you own that domain, because that's the most important real estate in the online space.
Okay, one, I see a lot of requests coming in for the videos. We will share it with the Ajanta team and they will share the videos with you. We have time for the last question. Where's that? So there's a question from the challenges faced by an old practicing doctor with that of digital evolution. You know, is it easy to do? Is it difficult to do? It is the need of the hour. We understand that. But how important and how easy is telemedicine, digital marketing for a doctor in today's environment? And I think that is the one that we want to end with.
My recommendation on this is, I do understand that it's a complicated ecosystem for a lot of people. My father is in his mid 70s and he finds it hard to do anything outside of WhatsApp to begin with. So I think the simplest way to think about it is creating content has become exceptionally easy. And if you're a revered practitioner in this space, I think it's only a matter of people wanting to listen to you. And frankly, if you know how to use a mobile phone, that's the only device, frankly, that you need to be on any of these platforms. The simplest thing to do would be to start a Twitter account. It takes very little to sort of start it. You don't need to go through the multiple, sort of assets that you need to put up on LinkedIn for that matter. And if it helps, you can just start with finding your niche. We spoke about how vernacular content and video are really sort of making a difference. If you start with giving very precise information on Twitter, that is, of course, medically grounded, scientifically sort of the expertise is there. And if you create these little videos and even if you share it like the same that you would probably share on a WhatsApp video, and if you put it on Twitter, it's probably the easiest thing to publish and get started with. So we do recognize that it's a very complicated ecosystem, especially if you want to look at customer journeys and if you want to look at a lot of these apps, but it's all in your phone. And I will just leave on this note and say that I mean, the world is looking at you today in this day and age, and they've come to realize the importance that healthcare professionals have in the current context of things, because we didn't see the pandemic coming in the way it really has. So what I can say with certainty is that people are looking for more information, more relevant information, and they're looking for an environment where they can be remotely connected somehow to get the proper advice from doctors. So I'm sure it will be appreciated, and it is being appreciated. And on that note, with my humble thanks as well for being here, and I've taken every opportunity, at least amongst my family doctors as well, to be present in here at this hour of need. And I mean, I'm reaching out to them through WhatsApp because that's platforms that they've already been in. They also are trying to organize different ways of being present. But I'd like to sign off by saying thank you very much for your service at this hour, your service to humanity more than anything else, and sort of helping us through this crisis.
So yeah, just one last question which we didn't touch upon, and this for Raghav basically. There are a lot of ophthalmologists on this session, and are there any platforms where we have specific therapy area specialists meeting together or discussing or having patient platforms? So are there specific therapy area platforms where we feel where we can share where the doctors can communicate or talk, or through any of the three that we mentioned? This is for ophthalmologists.
Yes. So so platforms like QUORA, DocPlexes, etc., while they allow doctors from all specializations, but within the once you log into the platform, again, there are therapy area or specialization specific groups and communities where you can discuss and have conversations on everything from live patient cases to questions that you may have, and you'll find relevant ophthalmologists not only from this country, but globally even.
All right. I think that's it from the bunch of questions that we had. Thank you very much. I think this has been one of the best sessions that we have handled. We've done this regularly, but I think the kind of questions that we've got today has really enlightened us, especially in the environment that we are in. And digital marketing is critical because it's an opportunity to touch base with your patients at regular intervals, at regular times, without, and also keeping in mind the various norms that have been the new normal, which is all about social distancing, getting out of your houses, and how to provide the right information at the right time. So digital marketing is going to be a key. It is something that we will be living with for some time now. And basis what we've tried to explain today, if there are any more questions, please do share them with the team at Ajanta, and we'd be happy to solve them or share the answers in as fast as possible. Thank you very much. This is Glenn D'Souza from Surya and from Raghav, and all the very best, and have a great Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank the speakers for wonderful insight to unlock the digital potential. Also, I thank all the doctors who had taken time and joined this program. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Thank you, Gaurav, for all the help. Thank you, Surya.
Thanks,
and
Gaurav.
thank you, Raghav.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Loved having the session. Hope it was useful. Thanks, everyone. We're going to sign off now.
Thank you, sir.